the Amari Rodgers? Where are just the kind of guys that were forgotten with the Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson years, where it's like they had a lot of big-time players out wide. They had skill position talent. It
Mike
wasn't
Williams.
just and Williams, like Mike Williams. Like, there was just a lot of dudes to go along with their 5-star quarterback who could do it all, and they haven't had that the last couple of years. And I think DJ Uiagalelei really suffered in that regard, where if you look at the roster, it's like, okay, it's Will Shipley, and where else? Like, what else are you looking at that really scared defenses?
Justin Ross was
Justin Ross.
like nothing after his freshman year, really, with the injuries, and he's never really the same.
So they just never had the dudes out wide that scared opposing defenses all that much. So it was just a different situation. Now you get those two in the boat, and Sammy Brown obviously at linebacker, and suddenly you're cooking with something here. It's an impressive week, I think, by and large, for Dabo and his crew.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, this guy, I think the composite, he's a 4-star, but I think 24/7 rankings have him as the 9th overall player. Like, this super big time. We just talked about Sammy Brown yesterday, and now Bryant Wesco, and then who was the other receiver? TJ Moore, both committed today. Like, that's 3 of the top 4 commits in their entire class that just hopped on board in the last 2 days. So I'm not sure where they were before those rankings, but now they're before those commits. But now they're sitting at the 8th class in the 24/7 rankings.
And a lot of movement still to be done there, because I think they have. Let's see here. Yeah, they only have 11 hard commits to this point, so they still have a lot of room to move around, because like they quietly haven't had a top 10 class in the last couple of years. So Dabo has to, when you're not utilizing the portal, which is something Dabo has not done, you have to win in the recruiting battles again that they have not really done the last couple of years. So I'm very curious to see if they end up with a top 10, top 5-ish class, because I think they actually sneakily need it more than many people might think.
Yeah, and that's what makes you wonder, like, how sustainable kind of their organization is. Like, I'm trying to the tenure, because the era of like I guess their reign of obviously going to all the college football playoffs, like, that's obviously over, but their window isn't necessarily closed. If they bounce back, they're still a really good program, but it makes you wonder if it really was just like a perfect storm for these handful of years, that because it wasn't like huge classes then either. They had some like 17, 18 player classes that just hit on everybody. Like, so it didn't look like they were like recruiting elite, because they'd have like the 9th or 10th ranked class, but it'd have like 4 or 5 5-stars in it, and it would be small, but like the quality over the quantity. And recruiting is such a numbers game. You just have to get as many guys and hope as many as possible pan out. So, you're not seeing that with the last few classes Clemson's had. So I think there's a lot of pressure on what Clemson's going to be this year.
Yeah, 11 and 10 the last 2 cycles. So you gotta jump back in a little bit higher up. I mean, obviously they still kind of hit the 5-stars with Cade, DJ. They're gonna keep getting the 5-star quarterback.
But yeah, then there's the DJU. There's the 5-star quarterback that doesn't pan out. They had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence back to back, and it doesn't always go that well.
No, it does not. But we'll see what they look like. I'm very fascinated to see what Clemson looks like this year, because I think they're sitting back enjoying all the Florida State CFP buzz before the year, where they're like, can Florida State beat us? Can Florida State cross that bridge before you write us off forever? That the reign of Clemson dominance is over. I am like, that's the circle. That's a top 5 game this year here in college football, right? Like Clemson,
the orange and purple reign.
Yeah.
I know a newspaper somewhere had to use that headline. I can't be the first one to think of that.
Matt Green, 16 teams made Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio this year. So the 16 teams who can actually win a national title. It's one of my favorite things to parse through each and every year here. Yes. You
skipping the last topic we got here? Are you just jumping in straight to the blue chip?
I was jumping in straight to this first. Jumping into this first.
Hey, this is your show, man.
No, it's all good.
I'm just glad to be here.
Matt going through the Rolodex as we're going. I love it. Well,
you throw me off my show sheet, man. I'm sorry. Giving the listeners a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah. We do have a show sheet, and it's a fun experience putting it all together each week. But Matt Green, there were a lot of different things I wanted to get to here, and I want to run through quickly the 16 teams that made this list. And look, folks, this doesn't mean that it is, but Elliott does a great job of explaining like what goes into this, how the ratio works. It's not super complicated, but it is important because it's a good measure of whether or not you can win the national title, because as he even puts at the history, in 2022, Georgia took home the title with a 77% ratio. 2021, they had an 80%, beating the number one team in BCR that year. 3 of the 4 playoff teams in 2021 were BCR teams, and Cincinnati was actually the first non-blue chip ratio team to make the playoff since 2017. But you keep going back: Alabama, LSU, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State, Alabama, all over 50% in that ratio. So it's not an exact science, but it is a tell as to whether or not your team has enough blue chippers. And again, this does not mean you can only teams with blue chippers and 5 stars and all 5 stars and 4 stars work out. What it means is you have to, like, over the couple year time span of when you cover this and what years this covers up until 2023, you have to have enough dudes to win the title. You just do. Like, you have to have enough. Like, you will have, they're like, oh, well, what about Mac Jones? He was a 3-star quarterback, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, yeah. And then there were also 27 4 and 5 stars that were also extremely important to what Alabama was doing. And that's where people overlook it, where they like to point out the anomalies, the guys who weren't the 3 and 4 stars, where it's like, it's not only the supremely talented guys as to whether or not you win, that there are some dudes who play above the ring. Best example of this, Stetson Bennett, obviously. I don't know if you heard this or not, but he walked on at Georgia, Matt Green. He was a former walk-on.
Is that right?
Yeah, Stetson Bennett, former walk-on.
I heard he used to wear a U.S. Postal Service hat, and that's why they call him the mailman. Have you ever heard that fun fact?
I had not. Did you know Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton were roommates last year? They're pretty
also,
good friends.
Jake Fromm was in the Lily World Series. I don't know if you heard that either.
I'd heard some things. But here are the teams. Let's run it down. And I think this is just it's just interesting, I think, to think about, because some of these teams in this list, you're like, man, could you talk yourself into them? Because we're going to get into it. The number one, 90%, which is